Good afternoon. So today we are back on with the University of Helsinki's massive open online Java course. My name is Duncan and today we're going to be looking at part 3 and specifically, or more specifically, we're going to be looking at lists. So by the end of this series of videos we should be familiar with the list structure and know how to use a list in a program. We'll be familiar with the concept of an index. You can add values to a list and know how to retrieve the information from the list's indices. You know how to iterate over a list with multiple different loop types. You know how to check if a value exists in a list, and also know how to remove values from a list. And finally, we'll be aware of the list being a reference type variable and become familiar with using lists as a method parameter. So I've had a quick look through this one. I think there's about 14 challenges to do, so this is going to be a really good one to sort of sink our teeth into. And lists is going to be a really interesting topic. I hope you guys do find it interesting. So basically, looking at lists is about storing lots of different or lots of types of data in one place or in one sort of variable in a sense. But I'm sure they'll be able to explain that a bit better than me. So in programming, we often encounter situations where we want to handle many values. The only method we've used so far has been to define a separate variable for storing each value, which is impractical. So here they've got an example of a few words. An example that I used before is, imagine you've been asked to create a student program which records student attendances. You might be tempted to write 52 separate integers for each of the weeks of the year, or up to 360 odd for the days of the year. So that, like this, would be very, very impractical. The solution presented above is useless in effect. Consider a situation where there are thousands of words to store. Programming languages offer tools to assist in storing large quantities of values. We will next take a peek at perhaps the single most used tool in Java, the ArrayList, which is used for storing many values that are of the same type. So they're talking about the same data type, so that could be the integers, strings, chars, it could be classes, which are specialist strings, or objects, and things like that. ArrayList is a pre-made tool in Java that helps dealing with lists. It offers various methods, including ones for adding values, for removing values, and also for the retrieval of a value from a specific place in the list. The concrete implementations, which is how the list is actually programmed, has been abstracted behind the methods so that a programmer making use of the list doesn't need to concern themselves with its inner workings. The list is part of the Java collections and is used as a bit of an update on arrays. So list is sort of like the array's newer, younger brother or whatever. So it's very, very similar to an array, but it has more features, which are hard-coded methods. So for example, the add method in an array list is very simple. It's just .add, open and close parentheses with whatever you want to be added in between the parentheses. Whereas with an array, it was a bit more complex. So for an array list to be used, it first needs to be imported into the program. So this is very, very similar to how we import a scanner, although I suppose actually our scanners are normally pre-imported. This is achieved by including the import java.util.ArrayList. So before, we've been using java.util.scanner at the top of the program. Below is an example when ArrayList is imported into the program. The good thing about Java, or specifically NetBeans I suppose, is that when you use a class that isn't standard, like a scanner or something like that, something that needs an import, NetBeans will recognise that, as most IDEs will, and it will prompt you and say you need to add in another import. So the imports normally go at the top here underneath the package, so there should be something here that says package, but presumably because it's part of this, it isn't there. We can write in the java.util.ArrayList, or like I say, if we type in the syntax for an array, for an array list, it will actually give us the prompt to import it. So let's get rid of that, there we go. So to use an array list, it's very similar to creating a scanner. So we do ArrayList. This is just an example, so this one can be of type string. and then we need to give it a name. So I'll call this one ArrayList name equals new ArrayList, open and close the diamond parentheses. These diamond parentheses are next to your M and / on your keyboard, and then open and close parentheses like that. And then you'll see that, very similar to a scanner if you've ever imported one yourself, that you need to do the import. So if I just show you here, so if I just leave that there, oh, the scanner's already imported, right, let's get rid of that. So we've got our red underline. So what we can do to resolve this is either click on the light bulb and then add import, or we can press Alt and Enter on our keyboard and it brings up the same menu and allows us to do the import. The great thing about using the Alt and Enter is that you don't need to take your hands off the keyboard, which is quite nice. What have I got there? Oh, turned on debugging. That's fine. Right. So, okay, so let's head back to the class here. Creating a new list is done with the command ArrayList type, so that could be string, int, char, etc. List, and that's the name, so we called ours new ArrayList, or no, we called ours ArrayList name, sorry, equals new ArrayList, and then we've got the open and close parentheses, where type is the type of value to be stored in a list, so string, etc. We create a list for storing strings in the example below. So here we've got ArrayList string new list equals new ArrayList. When a list variable is initialized, the type of values to be stored is also defined in addition to the variable type. All the variables stored in a given list are of the same type. As such, the type of an ArrayList that stores strings is ArrayList string. A new list is created with the command new ArrayList. When defining the type of values that the list can include, the first letter of the element type has to be capitalized. A list that includes int type variables has to be defined in the form of ArrayList integer, and a list that includes doubles is ArrayList double. So you might be tempted to type in int, but for this example it needs to be integer. So if we change this one, if we replace that with an int there, it doesn't like it, we get an error. So we have to do it like that. The reason for this has to do with how the ArrayList is implemented. Variables in Java can be divided into two categories: value type of primitive and reference type. Value type variables such as int or double hold their actual values. Reference type variables such as ArrayList, in contrast, contain a reference to the location that contains the values relating to that variable. Value type variables can hold a very limited amount of information, whereas references can store a nearly limitless amount of information. You'll find examples below of creating lists that contain different types of values. So here we go. So earlier we were saying about adding, and it was a case of .add open and close parentheses with whatever you want to add there. This is it. So this is how you add to an array list, in fact a list. So it's really, really straightforward. Once a list has been created, ArrayList assumes that all the variables contained in it are reference types. Java automatically converts an int variable into an integer when one is added to a list, and the same occurs when a variable is retrieved from the list. The same conversion occurs for double type variables, which are converted into double. This means that even though a list is defined to contain integer type variables, variables of type int can also be added to it. So here we go, we've got our integer array list, int integer equals 1, and then we're adding the value 1 using the integer. And then here we've got a similar example with doubles. We'll be returning to this theme since the categorization of variables into value and reference types affects our programs in other ways as well. The next example demonstrates the addition of a few strings into an array list containing strings. Addition is done with the list method add, which takes the value to be added as a parameter. We then print the value at position 0. To retrieve a value from a certain position, you use the list method get. which is given the place of the retrieval as a parameter. To call a list method, you first write the name of the variable describing the list, followed by a dot and the name of the method. So here we've got word list. So if I just move my screen to the left like that, and like that. So in this example, we've got word list. So we've got word list.add first and word list.add second. In this example, our array list is called ArrayList name, which is a terrible name for an array list. And what we would do is add the values. Oh, it's gone a bit funny there. We would add the values, so we could do a name. Oh, why isn't that like that? Oh, I didn't change it back to integers either. There's string. There we go. And so again, remember, if you hold Control-Shift and up, you can print out multiple of the same command. So we can just add a few different things in here. There we go. And so when we run that, all of those items will be added to this array list here. Okay, so that's the add function. We've also got the get. So we can do, as we've got here, system.out.print wordlist.get 0. So if you imagine, you may have heard or seen the programming jokes that arrays start at 0. So whereas when we learn to count, we would normally start at 1, and then obviously up through the numbers, arrays start at 0. So just for an example, the square brackets is normally how you signify an array, so it's just habit from working with arrays rather than lists. But what we can do is if we do system.out.println and then ArrayList name dot get, and then it asks for an index. So if we do 0, that's going to give me hopefully my name. And then if we do a couple more, let's do 2. So if we look at this, remember this one isn't 1, this is 0. This is 1, this is 2, so it should print Java. And then, so it would be 3, 4, so let's do 4, and hopefully we should get MOOC. So let's give that a print. Press the button. There we go. Sorry if you can hear my computer whirring in the background. I'm updating the new Elite Horizon Dangerous Alpha, Odyssey Alpha, and it's just taking its toll on my old PC. So here we go, look, so this is position 0, this is position 2, and then this is position 4. So that's how that works. Okay, so there we go. As can be seen, the get method retrieves the first value from the list when it is given parameter 0. This is because list positions are counted starting from 0. The first value is found by wordlist.get0, the second would be wordlist.get1, and so on. And here's an example, so they've updated the 0 to the 1. So remember on this example, this line would be 0, and this line would be 1. So when they're printing out 1, they get the answer second. So let's have a look at our first exercise. Actually, do you know what? I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to quickly just make sure I've got the correct bits downloaded. In fact, you know what? I'll keep it running because just in case anyone needs to know how to download the additional bits. So if memory serves, which it normally doesn't, we go to TMC, download and update exercises, and just double check the name of that one, second plus third. Oh, I wonder what that one is. Anyway, we'll download it anyway. So we'll get all of part 3 downloaded. So I will see you guys when this is downloaded. There we go. So they are all downloaded. Why has that one got red on it? Let's have a look. Oh, it's just got a typo. So the list here is obviously called list, and it says list A. So if we just get rid of that A, that should update that. There we go. Excellent. Interestingly, if you are working from home on your own projects, and you get a red error up here on the top left, and you think you resolve it like this, but the error still shows. If you just save your file, it will update, and hopefully, as long as you've solved the error, get rid of the error for you. Okay, so we're looking actually for second plus third. Oh no, I skipped past it. So we're looking for third element, sorry. This exercise contains a base that asks the user for strings and adds them to a list. The program stops reading when the user enters an empty string. The program then prints the first element of the list. Your assignment is to modify the program so that instead of the first value, the third value is printed. Remember that programmers start counting from 0. The program is allowed to malfunction if there are fewer than 3 entities, so you don't need to prepare for such an event at all. That's good, because that would be something called, or potentially could be called, an array index out of bounds, which I'm sure we'll look at later. But if you are getting array index out of bounds errors, it will be because your list is either, or the loop that you're using is too big or too small for the array or list that you're looking at. So if they want us to print position 3, oh I see, so they're counting normally. So this would be 1, 2, 3, but for an array it would be 0, 1, 2, 3. So they're good that they've specified that they want Alex and then Mary printing. Okay, let's have a look and see what we can do. So, third element. What I'm going to do is just move this to the left. I think my memory's getting worse. Okay. So we need to print the third element. So that would be 0, 1, 2. So we change that 0 to a 2. There we go. So scanner, we've got our scanner, that's great. We've got our array list, we've got both our imports. While true, normally I format mine a little different. So you've got all your imports at the top and then your loop. So there we go. So while true, string input is equal to scanner.nextLine. If input equals blank, then break out of the loop. Otherwise, add the input to the list. So hopefully, actually, just changing that 0 to a 2 should have got that little point there. So let's just give that one a test against the server and see what we get back. And there we go. That one was as simple as that. So let's get that one closed. There we go. Just make sure our points are... There we go. Excellent. So, second plus third. In the exercise template, there is a program that reads integers from the user and adds them to a list. The list ends when the user enters 0. The program then prints the first value on the list. Modify the program so that instead of the first value, the program prints the sum of the second and third numbers. The program is allowed to malfunction if there are fewer than 3 entries. Okay. Quite like it with the split screen. It works a bit nicer, I think. Okay, so second plus third, we've got an error here as well, so that's fine, we'll get that one sorted hopefully. So the list name is numbers. Oh, that was the Uncle Bob YouTube video that I shared in the previous video. There we go, so we've got numbers, we've got that printed. I'm going to sort this out, just so it's how I prefer it. Go. So that's the end of the while loop. That one is the end of the method. Bro. Okay, so we need to print out these. So modify the program. Instead of the first value, the program prints the sum of the second. So in this example, is that going to be 3? And the third, oh yeah, 3 plus 8. So the second is actually going to be 1. And then what we're going to need to do is numbers.get and then 2. So let's give that a little run and see what we get back. Brilliant, another one done. That's quite nice. This is a good introduction into lists. So, retrieving information from a non-existent place. Oh look, there we go, our first index out of bounds. So what we've got here, oh actually I didn't read this bit, did I? If you try to retrieve information from a place that does not exist on the list, the program will print an index out of bounds exception error. In the example below, two values are added to a list, after which there is an attempt to print the value at place 2. So I'm going to copy this into here because I don't maybe think that was especially clear. There we go. So we've got this very similar sort of bit of code that hopefully now we're getting used to. Remember that arrays start at 0, so this line here is position 0 and this one is position 1. So this system out is looking to print at position 2, which we know doesn't exist, there's nothing there, for example. So that's why we get this index out of bounds. So since the numbering or the index of the element starts with 0, the program isn't able to find anything at place 2 and its execution ends with an error. Below is a description of the error message caused by the system. Now their errors are really useful. They give you a lot of, well they don't give you loads of information, but they give you a fair amount of information. Some of it can be a bit confusing, but I'll give you a little explanation on some of that now. I don't know why that keeps printing up there, it's not good. Oh, there we go. So, what I'm going to do, actually I'm going to copy this into NetBeans 8.2 because I wonder if that might give a, because I think that this TMC one might be a slightly different error because it's using Apache Commons rather than sort of the standard JDK. So let me start a new project, that'll be fine. Okay, so what we've got here is our array list, and just as we expected, because I've pasted it in and I haven't got my import, I need to create that import. So remember, Alt and Enter on the keyboard, and then I can add the import there like that. So that's great. So if I run that now, the error that we'll get will be slightly different. There you go. So you can see that firstly it's a different color, but it doesn't make reference to this Apache Commons and things like that. And the reason that we get that error, or this one here specifically, is because the JDK that we use isn't the standard one. We use the Open Adopt or Adopt Open JDK, remember when we downloaded it at the beginning of the course. So what we've got here are a few different things. So here we've got exception in the main, Java index out of bounds. So there are a few different types of exception, these are called exceptions, that you can get printed, and just knowing that this is an index out of bounds, you should be thinking, right, that's going to be something to do with my, my array list. So it says index 2, size 2. This isn't especially clear. What this should probably read, or maybe one of them should read, is that the index is 2, like this, and the size is 2, but remember there should be a difference. The index should either be 1, which would be this one, or size, maybe, I don't know, maybe size too small or something like that. So here we've got an error on line 659, 435, and then some other bits going on as well. So the import that we've created for ArrayList is a type of class. So remember, a class is the whole sort of Java document. Okay, so we've added an import for ArrayList. So the error is actually with line 659 of the range check class inside the ArrayList.java. So if we click on here, whatever the array number, oh here we go, index out of bounds. So this is the actual error. Okay. So when you see an error on line 659 and you're thinking, well hang on a minute, I've only written 10 lines of code, it will probably be an import or something similar to that. If you keep looking through, you can see here that this third error, Java application 10, which is what my terribly named project is called, has an error on line 26. Now that is more appropriate for us because that is our actual class, and line 26 is this one, so you can see the line number there. And if we kind of combine that with what it said about the index and size, we can probably figure out what that is actually trying to say to us. So I will close that one. There we go. The error message provides hints of the internal implementation of an ArrayList object. It lists all the methods that were called leading up to the error. First, the program called the main method, whereupon ArrayList's get method was called. Subsequently, the get method of ArrayList called the range check method, in which the error occurred. This also acts as a good illustration of proper method naming. Even if we'd never heard of the range check method, we'd have good reason to guess that it checks if a search place is contained within a given or desired range. The error likely occurred because this was not the case. So when you see an error, don't be put off by it, because it's not obvious, but they are there to help you. So try not to be worried about them. They do give you some useful information. So I'm going to stop this one here. I hope that that has been useful for you, especially the sort of bit that we looked at about errors, and starting to have a bit of a look at the structure of classes and packages and the exception errors. So as always, thank you very much for joining me today, and I will see you very soon for part 2. Good luck and happy coding.